Need help with tax, don't know what to do. The Brysons are here for you. We know every tip and trick. The serious tax talk with the Louisiana twist.
Hello, and welcome back for another episode of Talkin Tax. We're here today, Carrie Bryson and Angie Bryson.
Hey, everybody.
We're going to have a serious tax talk with a Louisiana twist today. Today, we're going to talk about a topic I think everyone has heard about or is probably aware of, the new Inflation Reduction Act.
Lots of buzz on that.
Lots of buzz that the Congress just passed. We're going to give you a little brief rundown of that, kind of some highlights.
How many times has your phone gone off?
Oh, yes.
Since the Inflation Reduction Act.
It's so funny. People you don't even know, really. You meet somebody in the hey, as soon as they find out your tax lawyer or Bryson Law Firm or something, hey, what about that new act? Are y'all going to be busy?
Long lost college buddy.
Yeah.
Workout friend.
Yeah, many.
Et cetera.
Many.
Yeah. Anyway, it's pretty relevant, right?
So let's talk about this Inflation Reduction Act, Ange. Basically, I think everybody's heard Congress authorized the IRS $80 billion.
With a B.
Billion with a B.
A lot of money.
Billion. That's a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
And what was the reasons for that? And what's the IRS saying how they're going to spend that money?
The big points, right, are more 87,000 new agents, IRS employees over the next 10 years. You know, the question in my mind is, how are they going to fill that many spots?
They're not.
It's going to take a while, right? But they're going to come. It's going to happen because they're trying to fill that tax gap, right? And they're going to try to collect.
Well, the tax
gap is $600 billion per my cheat sheet here.
Yeah, but that was the whole purpose of the act.
The tax gap is what they're not collecting right now. The potential of what's going unpaid. So that's $600 billion with a B. So they're going to spend $80 billion to collect $600 billion. A pretty good return on investment, but they've got to pay 87,000 people to do that. Right. So that's the big one. They're going to hire a bunch of people, essentially.
Yes.
And then with that is going to come, what do you think? What do you think's coming first? Audits?
Well, that's what they're saying. The audits are coming because audits have been down the last few years, as we all know. But I think the big buzz and what's creating the buzz
armed agents
is, the armed agents, but also with the audits is that Congress is saying that the audits are going to be for the high wage earners. Mm-hmm. But the paper itself and the act itself, if you read between the lines, it doesn't really say that. It doesn't guarantee that. So,
well, they're saying you have to earn 400,000 or more to be subject to the enhanced audit scrutiny.
Yeah, but as history serves, and if you could look back at just what's happening in the past, we all know that the primary targets of audits are certainly not the 400,000 and above. It's a lot less than that. And I think most people think that trend's going to continue with this new money. They're just going to focus harder on the middle class.
Well, from just our practical experience, the audits come to people who are businesses, essentially, that are self-employed individuals who have the ability, not necessarily that you are, to underreport income, basically. So that's not a $400,000 necessarily, benchmark. That could be anywhere way below that or over that. So, I don't think that's a good indicator on who's going to be subject to audit. I feel like, and that's the conversations I'm having with people who are calling me, which, a lot of people, if you're self-employed, have a small business, and they want to dive into your books and a questionable tax return with year after year of loss, potentially, or you're not filing returns, or there's some sort of trigger that it could be simple, a late filing or an underpayment or an overpayment, some sort of weird signal. And that's kind of the next component of funding, right? Artificial intelligence.
But while you're talking about audits, though, the thing to remember is that we know the audits mostly are generated by the computer.
Paper.
The computer's examining the return, and something is out of whack or out of line. It triggers the computer, then it gets sent to when
Oh, yeah.
human looks at it.
Yeah.
And then that's when the audit really begins. So when that audit begins, though, the problem is, I think for most taxpayers, the audit may be for one thing, but once they start, then the
Dig it.
whole thing comes up.
Well, I
So we
mean,
got
they
to go
have
through the whole
subpoena
thing.
power. They're looking they're looking at your accounting records. I mean,
Yeah.
once that trigger,
So it's a lot more.
yeah, it's Pandora's box,
Yeah, it
essentially.
kind of opens up
Yeah.
the can of worms.
Right.
And then, next thing you know, you're talking about how many times you drove back and forth to work, and, where you kept logs.
Yeah.
And,
How many
so-
meals you ate, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And what was that travel about? And
Right.
this, and
Yeah.
what was this expense for? And you have to go through everything. So it opens up everything.
Yeah. I mean, but that's what
so-
the artificial intelligence
Well,
component
that's
of
a
this
part of
funding
yeah.
is.
So
right?
the other parts of the act, just to kind of run down, because I think that so it's 87,000 new
agents.
agents.
Right.
There's also what you've referred to, the AI component. They're going to
Ramp up their
ramp up the computers
systems.
and their systems and their procedures, which
They need an
would
overhaul.
frankly need to be overhauled.
Yeah.
So that's probably a good thing,
Yeah, it could help.
at least for the country, maybe not for the taxpayers, but
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
they probably need that. And then there's also the virtual currency, the new,
Crypto.
the new cryptocurrency that the IRS is kind of behind on, and I think they're going to catch up now because they really don't know how they're going to treat that quite yet. I think they're going to figure it out here pretty quickly. So, and there's some
That's
other
a whole
provisions.
that's a whole podcast.
Yes, we can talk
crypto.
about that another one, and there's also a little bit of good in it that we could talk about in a minute. But let's make sure we covered everything. The armed IRS staff, I think, is what caught a lot of buzz.
Lots of memes about that.
For us, who I guess we deal with it, we know that there's a certain element of the IRS that's already
Armed
armed
dangerous.
or packing, or however you want to say it. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's have their sunglasses and they come.
Well, I mean,
they're ready. They're ready.
represented people
Yes.
who are in
Yes.
investigation.
And remember, I can remember years ago, back in the day,
Mm.
many years ago, there was the revenue officers, not even the criminal side of it, the regular.
Sure.
A few of those were carrying.
Well, back in the 70s and
yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, not the 70s. I wasn't.
Later than that.
I wasn't
We-
practicing law in the 70s.
No, we
uh,
were.
I don't
We're
think. I
not
was.
that old.
Yeah. Come on.
We heard about it.
Yeah.
We heard about it.
We were told about it.
But I mean, that it's having an armed IRS agent is not, to put some fears to bed. That's not new.
Yes.
It's just a matter of how are they going to use the numbers maybe and the enhancement of enforcement in that way.
Right. Maybe to me, that is kind of a signal that they are going to ramp up the criminal enforcement as
Sure.
well.
Yeah.
Which that should be a concern for all, because
Well,
the crimes are significant and serious, and if they start really getting after and investigating those crimes, then be a different IRS that we've become accustomed to for the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
yeah. So what are the good things? I mean, there's a few good relief provisions. I think some penalty relief stuff that they put in there. So
Yeah. I
what
mean,
happened there?
So one of the positives, if there are any in the act, is that they're going to give some automatic penalty relief for late filing of returns, but due to COVID, basically. So there's no late. They're not going to abate penalties related to late payment, but basically for late filing.
Like failure to file.
Yeah,
Failure to file penalty.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, that's
It's
5.
substantial.
Well, that's
It could be
5%.
up to 25% of the
It's
of the
up
tax.
5% a month, up to which caps at
Right.
at 25%.
Right.
I mean, that's a pretty substantial penalty.
And it's automatic, which is, most penalty abatements in our world. I mean, I've never really had one just automatically done. You have to request. And this is the way I understand it, it's going to happen automatically.
Yeah.
It's just going to
And the failure to file, I mean, everybody knows the filing deadlines. So it's kind of it's a hard penalty. You have to have some reasonable basis for not filing.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
paying and not filing are two different things. And the not filing, I mean, we all know the deadlines,
Well, I mean,
it's due.
if you're tax prepared.
Yeah. So, I mean,
drops
you
the
got to have a
ball or-
hurricane, you got to have
Yeah.
a storm, you got to have,
Flood.
something major has got to happen for you to,
In normal situation.
yeah, a normal situation
Yeah.
for you to get that. But now,
Something did happen.
yeah.
COVID.
I think the cutoff date, I may be wrong on this, but I think the cutoff date was September 30th. So if you file before September 30th, 2022, the 19 and 20 tax returns,
Mhm.
and I guess even the 21, if you filed it before then, if you didn't get an extension, then you would automatically get the failure to file penalty, which basically is going to be 25% of the tax liability if you owe.
Yeah.
So that's pretty
yes, 2
significant.
years. It's 19 and 20.
20.
Right. I
Yeah.
just wanted to verify.
So that's a pretty good little penalty relief provision that was put in the act. So there was a little positive there. Not much of a trade-off for the IRS ramping up, but still it's something.
Yeah.
So because those penalties, as we know, we deal with it every day, the penalties are not easily abated.
No.
I mean, it requires a
No.
lot of effort and work
Yeah.
to get those penalties abated. So
Right.
for them to automatically grant it without you having to do much is pretty significant. So anything else in the act? I think we covered it all, huh?
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff in there, but I mean, those are the highlights that are relevant to this podcast. Again, I really feel like what's going to happen fast is audits. I really feel like that's coming after the midterms. Once we get through the election cycle, audits are going to be the thing because they're easy to start with a paper, like you said, computer comparison, throws out the paper, bubbles it up, and people are going to start what I predict. I'm not a prophet, but what I predict is lots of notices going out. Hey, we propose this change to your tax return. Hey, we see this problem with your filing. And that's going to lead
Yes.
to the next phase if people are not responsive, and if you don't respond, then basically you've acquiesced and they're going to start collecting the tax bills that they quote unquote propose, So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I think those are the highlights. I mean, we can move on to, and all of that dovetails into what we do, right? So if you need help, why Bryson? Like, why do you need, the next topic is,
Yeah.
why should you hire an attorney?
Well, I think the first point would be kind of to maybe back up a second, is that what I would want to convey, of course, I'd want to convey higher Bryson, but other than that, I mean, what I would want to
It's
convey,
a little self-serving.
yeah, no, if you have a tax issue, a problem,
Mhm.
whether you have a liability that you owe,
Mhm.
or if you have returns that are not filed, I think in this country, because of the last couple of years, the IRS has basically really been shut down. I mean,
Definitely.
sleep, whatever, on pause due to COVID. So I think we've kind of been lulled into this false sense of security that, oh, it's going to be okay. My caution to everyone would be, I think that's coming to an end. I think it's time, if you have a problem,
Mhm.
or if you think you have a problem, whether it be owing, if you have a tax liability you owe,
Right.
or if you have returns that need to be filed, or both, I think now is the time to get ahead of the curve to take care of your problem.
Clock is ticking.
Yes. And then I guess the question is, back to what, is who are you going to get to take care of the problem? And we could jokingly say about hiring Bryson, but I would say is to
Sure.
hire someone local. And I think one of the points I wanted to make about the act with new agents, it's going to go back to how it was 10 or 15 years ago, when it was really the local person who knew the local revenue officers,
Knocking on the door.
who knew that they knocked on the door.
Yeah.
And we know the local people,
Mhm.
we know,
Yeah.
we deal with them every day. It would be another reason to hire, because of this ramping up. I would stay away, and I caution, I know if you've ever listened to this,
No, I agree with you. I mean,
heard me
you're
caution
right.
about
You're right.
not hiring these national companies, or even companies from out of state, lawyers from out of state, or the national marketing companies, whoever it is. I would be very leery of doing that with these IRS ramping up, because they can't react as quick,
Well, they're not as responsive,
and they don't
because
know,
that's not what they're
they
designed
don't
to
have a
be.
personal relationship. I think there's probably not a revenue officer in Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi
Pretty
that
much
we've
in the
not dealt
Southeast,
with
yeah.
in the Southeast, because we've been doing it for so long, and all the new ones are coming, and we meet them as soon as they get out.
Mhm.
I would encourage that
Yeah, I mean,
to stay local.
if you go Google, you know, tax help or whatever, you're going to get hopefully Bryson, but you're going to get all national companies that are popping up who are
Yes.
paying millions, literally millions of
Yeah,
dollars
right.
to reach people all over the country. And there's, just based on our personal experience, I mean, 25 plus years doing this, there's not a lot of accountability with those folks. And we've heard and met with a lot of people who have hired one of those people or places
all the time.
and that spent a bunch of money, got nothing done, and then came to see us once they heard about us. So yeah, you're right. I mean, I think we're at the 11th hour with regard to enforcement, and anybody who's got a question about whether they're compliant, they probably should start the process of getting
Yes.
some help.
Because I do think the IRS is going to wake
It's
up.
coming after the midterms.
I think they're
you
going to
know, like
wake
we're
up.
it's coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not going to take long.
Oh, they could spin up pretty quickly. I mean, don't underestimate their ability to spin some
I
things
think
up.
so. They certainly spun down pretty quickly when COVID hit. I can tell you that. But I think they're getting ready to come
Yeah.
back in full force. Along the same vein about hiring local, I would encourage people to also hire attorneys, whether it be Bryson Law Firm or other lawyers who do this. And of course, I'm biased toward lawyers, but I will tell you that one of the main things for me about hiring attorneys, I know there's some points. Maybe I'll let Angie cover those in the paperwork
I
here.
want to do that, the third one.
Okay. But first, before we do this, I want to say something that's not included. And it's what I tell people all the time is why do we need a lawyer? Why not a CPA? Or why not this enrolled agent? Or
You
why
need a
not this?
CPA.
Yes. I'm not
do
saying you
some
don't need a
stuff.
CPA,
Yeah. I mean,
but I'm talking about not for
for your
filing. I'm
prep,
talking
right.
about for
a good accounting
yes.
work, good solid tax prep. Yeah.
Yes.
When resolution
You
work.
need good work, right?
Right.
But for the resolution work, and I think it really boils down to the fact in my mind that lawyers, through training and through school, are trained to represent third parties in an adversarial situation.
Mercenary.
Yeah, basically mercenaries, right? Pretty much what we are, hired guns, right?
Pretty relevant.
But we are trained that way, and I think it's very important. And I think as the IRS ramps up, it's going to even become more important because I think you're going to have people who are experienced in dealing, because the IRS can be very aggressive and can be very misleading.
Can be.
About things. And if you have someone who doesn't know the law and doesn't know your rights as a client,
Right.
who doesn't know the law and doesn't know all the options available,
Right.
and I think lawyers do. I think we're trained and we study, and that's what we have to do with all our required study and everything. We know all the options. We know how to use all the. We know how to use all the options.
Yeah.
And we know how to use the law in the favor. We're just trained in that way. And I think other professions, although they may do good or may not or whatever, but I think they lack that training of how to
Represent
a third
Be an
party
advocate.
in an adversarial situation.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where the difference in getting a lawyer. And I know, so we talked about, we know all the options, we know the law.
Right. So, we do know the law, right? So we've been doing this for 25 plus years or whatever. We are old, but I think I don't want to get too granular in the law, but what a lot of people don't understand or realize when you represent a typical client, let's just say you're the defendant in a case, because our clients, taxpayers, would be defendants. They're defending themselves against whatever the IRS is proposing. Normally, the person who's making the accusation has the burden of proving it. So I've got to prove that Carrie Bryson owes me this money in a typical debtor creditor situation. Well, the whole script is flipped with the IRS. So you've got to prove that you don't owe it, or you've got to prove
Through the negative. Yeah.
they have shifted the burden of proof to the person who's defending themselves, here, the taxpayer. And that's important to understand, because when that happens, and if you don't have someone who's trained in representing and proving your position, essentially, a non-attorney, you're already at a disadvantage, right? You're maybe putting yourself at you're just another disadvantage. You're kind of enhancing the disadvantage. So I know that's a little granular, but
That's a good point,
it's a
though.
big one for me
Very
these
good point.
days, because the whole technology world should change this, but it's a whole different legal analysis discussion. Is kind of like a fundamental, how
Yeah,
I like to get into
And also knowing,
policy.
tying on to that, just knowing that your client has the burden of proof, and then what it's going to take
Right.
to
How to do
fulfill
that.
or sustain that burden of proof.
Right. And never giving up.
And knowing when you have it and you don't, and what to do with it when you don't, and what you do with it.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah. I'm going to make you tell me no over and over and
over
over and over.
and going to the different.
Like, I'm not going to stop at
to
the
the
first
different
letter
channel.
that says, you know?
Yeah, I can tell you probably wrote some of this because I see your pet peeve. So I'm gonna let you talk about your holistic approach.
Oh, yeah. That's the one I wanted to.
I know.
So we're going
I
to
know.
jump ahead a little bit. I feel like what I've seen over the last several years is when folks try to tackle their tax problems, um, either outside of, with themselves or with another representative, the biggest mistake and what we are so good at doing, mostly because we practiced so long at this, is taking a holistic approach to what's in front of us. And by that is you've really got, and we had a whole internal discussion with all the attorneys here, and everyone agreed that that was our kind of like, other than being of utmost ethics and whatnot, that was really what we're really good at, looking at the whole picture and dissecting each tax period, creating a holistic approach for each period, because it's important to look at each one and analyze everything. If you over 6 years, you can't look at it as a whole. You've got to drill down in each tax period. You've got to figure out if there's a unique solution that we can create for that one that'll save the taxpayer money here, maybe guard the taxpayer while we work on the other periods, and look at the accounting system, look at their accounting system. Can we fix some things that will avoid, taxability in the future? Can we fix some things with the accounting system that'll get a better resolution? Because that's a possibility too. Can we lay low and let some statutes expire because the IRS is slow, and take advantage of their slowness while those debts just expire and go away, and then tackle the newer ones? We do that a lot. Can we make voluntary payments while we negotiate to minimize penalties and interest? I mean, there are so many scenarios under this holistic approach. I could do this all day, literally.
Mhm.
And so it is what jazzes me up. I know I'm not really a tax nerd, but what I love about that approach is that it's the most helpful and most beneficial for the client. And we've seen amazing results by taking that
Yeah.
approach. I mean, it's also the shotgun approach. You just shoot it out
Well, and
there.
have the ability
Yeah,
to
right.
see that. And kind of my pet peeve, what kind of ties into that. So I guess we say the same thing, but just a little differently. The thing that I enjoy, I think the most from the practice in when representing clients, is not only fixing their problem,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
because you change, it's
change
it's
lives.
mostly life
Right.
changing for a lot of clients, but it's also identifying the why. Why do we have this tax issue? What caused it? And let's make sure that's fixed.
Yeah.
Before we fix the problem,
Right.
because if we don't, and so many times I see people have fixed the problem, but they didn't fix the cause, and it just goes right back to the problem.
Starts all over again.
Starts all over. And that's not what I'm about or what I think we're about. I mean, if we're going to fix it, I'm going to fix it once and for all and be
Yeah.
done. But just kind of to get in that cycle where you just, you're you're paying the old and
Right.
creating new.
Right.
It's actually more detrimental to you because you get a brand new statute every time you create a new one. But anyway, to think that we also take this holistic approach, identify all the options and the
Right.
best options, but we also figure out
Why?
the why.
Why?
And,
You're right.
and we fix the why.
That's a really good point. And that takes time though, right? So
Very much,
back
yes.
to the original discussion about finding a local professional to help you. You've got to get personal with the tax problem. You can't treat it as a cookie cutter kind of, you owe the tax, you put you in a payment plan. I mean, to get down to this holistic type approach and the why, you've got to listen, you've got to study and understand the client and what their outcome goals are
Mhm.
to get there. And
And I
that
think-
takes a personal approach.
And I think also just to tie back in, since we're tying back in this whole conversation, I think it goes back to local because I think they have to understand the culture. I mean, when you're talking to,
The crawfish farmer,
the
or,
crawfish farmer, or the
cattle
farmer,
farmer,
yeah,
the oil field worker,
yeah.
the consultant
We-
who's in,
we know,
Dubai.
we
Right.
know all the,
Sure.
we know what's going on out there. We know
Right.
how it works and how
Right.
it doesn't work and
Or
what's
if you
going to.
don't know, ask.
Yeah.
Like, have an hour-long conversation. Tell me about your life. Tell me how we got here. Tell me, what's your dream? What do you want me to do for you? What's the outcome goal that you, yeah, right. So that's it. I mean, holistic approach. And then we know the law. I mean, there's just so many variables. And the big one for me is being able to advocate for people, to come in and step between the IRS and the taxpayer, to give them some breathing room, take the fear away. So, because fear causes paralysis, right?
Yes.
And it's a human instinct to shut down whenever you feel like you're vulnerable. So those are things that we're trained to do. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's about
Wrap
it. I
up?
think it is anything else about the Inflation Reduction Act that we need to talk about. I think we're done unless
Yeah.
you
Probably jumped all over the place.
want to talk about something else.
No.
I think I'm good.
Hunting?
Hey, yes, we can always talk about that. It's that time of year. It is that time of
Yeah,
year.
football, hunting, and the weather is wonderful today.
Yes,
So everybody's
football is
smiling at the
back.
great.
Weather's good.
Yeah.
Hunting season started. Let's do it, huh?
All right. Well, I guess until next time, Talk It Tax, Bryson Law Firm, and the Inflation Reduction Act. If we can be of any help to you guys, give us a buzz on brysonlawfirm.com or and reach out to us. There's a submission form on there. Just fill it out. Somebody will call you pretty quickly. And if anything, just do something, right?
Yep.
Until next time, see you guys later.